Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Annalisa with Journey to the Goddess TV, where I regenerate, rematriate, resacralize, and rewrite ancient feminine wisdom for modern women. Today, I am with Mikki Baloy. Mikki, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank
you. You're welcome. I'm really excited to have you here today. As you can tell, I'm a little giddy. But before I get into why I'm giddy, I'm going to give you a proper introduction here. So Mikki Baloy has studied with shamans, ritual keepers, and mystics from around the world. She offers private shamanic healings, ancestral lineage healing, group events and classes, and ceremonies, including weddings. Mikki is also a public speaker and minister of animism, currently living in the Hudson Valley of New York. Join her for a healing session, live conversation with Mother Mary, or retreat by visiting her website, mikkibaloy.com. And I will leave a link to that, of course, in the YouTube text box when we're through here. So again, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. And before we dive into the questions, why don't you have people or share with people where they can find your book?
Sure. So the book, which I have, is available on Amazon. We see?
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, this is up on Amazon. There's information about it on my website as well at mikkibaloy.com. So the link is there. Yeah.
Okay. Great. And I've had the opportunity to read an excerpt from it, and I can't highly recommend it enough. It's totally blew my mind in how I now think about Mother Mary, really in this whole new holistic way. But we'll get into that in a minute. So everybody, I also want to encourage you to like this video, to leave a comment at any point throughout this video, to subscribe to the channel, and also share this video with anyone else that you think would really find value in the messages and the wisdom of Mother Mary and Mikki's work, of course. So I've invited Mikki to open today with a invocation or some kind of prayer for her choice. So now is the time to lead us in that, Mikki. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the chance to do that. It's sort of my way when I do any kind of ritual thing. Yeah, just for us and for whoever might be watching this video now or in the future, to first just feel your seat in your seat. You know, just let yourself sink in a little. Gravity is part of our connection to the earth. So just letting gravity work on you a little bit. And feeling your breath. It doesn't need to be deeper or slower. Just feel where it is right now, the gift of this breath. And into this space that we're creating through this conversation, we welcome the wisest and kindest of our ancestors and the most benevolent of the other than humans that walk with us, the plants and animals, the minerals. And we acknowledge and give thanks to the good earth that we are on, the spirits of place, the features of the landscape that we're in relationship with right now. And with acknowledgement and gratitude to the mystery, to the creator, whatever that intelligence is that allows this moment to be, may we make the most of it. And of course, devotion and praise and love to the Mother, to Mother Mary, the Divine Feminine in all of her forms, but today specifically to Mother Mary. And so to all of that benevolence that's gathered here, we say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikki. Yeah, I want to share this interesting experience that I had preparing for our conversation today. And typically what happens is I start to get into the energy of the topic at hand and or the goddess energy that, you know, the particular goddess energy that I'll be working with my guest or talking about, discussing. And so as I was preparing yesterday, I had this very clear understanding that I needed to wear white today, that in reverence of her. And I've never actually had that kind of clear knowing about what I'm supposed to wear before. Usually it's just, you know, whatever I feel is, you know, most self-expressive for me. But this was very clear that I would be stepping into a space in reverence of our great mother. And I had to think about that for a second, because all of the goddesses of any tradition, like in the Hindu tradition, they're all mother goddesses in their own way, are all revered as Mother Jema, right? So why would I feel differently about Mother Mary, or why would it feel differently inside of me? And I feel as though, you know, maybe it has something to do with the fact that she represents the great mother archetype in a tradition in which I grew up within, even though in the particular strain of Christianity that I grew up in, she was not talked about at all. She was not revered. She was just the woman who gave birth to Jesus. You know, so in a way, this is, for me, it feels like a coming home to a reverence of her. And I think the way that she is expressed and portrayed through your book has allowed me to come home to her in this new way. So I want to honor you and the work that you're doing with her, because that's incredible. That's transformational in and of itself. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. It's so beautiful to hear that. It really is. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing it. I think it's part of the point. Like, I think it's part of why she's been showing up, because I'm not particularly Christian, I'm not Catholic. So it was sort of a puzzle to me that she was so much like in my space and so vocal, and I thought, well, you want somebody else, right? Like, you're not like, I'm kind of the pagan weirdo, like, you're not trying to talk with me. But I think that's part of the point, because she wants us to come home. She wants us to remember her. She wants to be seen outside the confines of a church. So that landed for you. That happened.
Yes.
I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled.
Yes, me too. Not trying to tell everybody what their experience is going to be from reading your book, but I think that is a potential for many people. So on that note, jumping off of that note, why do you feel like this book is coming through now? Why now, and why this book?
I mean, I can just say my own experience of it is really, it's all in her direction. That she has encouraged me to first to write down the messages that I was getting from her in my own personal devotions and practice, and then to start essentially channeling, but being with her with other people at the same time and sharing those messages. And then she was like, "Great, now you've got content. Like, now you've got a book, so go do that." So it was really that. In a way, I'm along for the ride with her. So I can't speak to what her plan is, what the bigger picture purpose is. But certainly there was not an urgency, but definitely an encouragement to make this happen now. Yeah.
Yes. And I think time will tell as to why. But I mean, again, I think even my experience is probably is probably a reason why. one of many reason whys, infinite
Mhm.
possibilities of the why.
Yes.
So I'd also like us to orient the audience for a moment. And if you could share just like really briefly about your history, like what led you to, do the work that you're doing, and then give maybe a little bit of a description of what shamanism is, and channeling, just to orient for people who may not know what that is.
Sure. I will try to be brief. That's so much. There's so much
I
in there to
know,
unpack,
I know.
um, but yeah. So I mean, my personal story is that I was always asking questions spiritually. I mean, even as a very little kid. Some of that's in the book, and was never really comfortable just taking on one descriptor, one religion. Did comparative studies in Eastern philosophy a bit in college and so forth. So I was always kind of a seeker. And I'll make a long story very short and just say that I was with a shamanic teacher at a workshop and was there really out of academic curiosity, but had this massive experience that I found out later is called a spontaneous initiation, which is one of the ways that people get sort of put on the shamanic path. Um, so I was sort of in an altered state, not having taken anything for about 3 days. Um, so that was a pretty good prompt that maybe this is something I needed to continue to explore. And so that was the formal beginning of my training about 13 years ago now. Um, and yeah, so what is shamanism? That's such a slippery question. I think it's such a
Yeah.
slippery word. Culturally, it's complicated. And a lot of the sort of European or Western styles of shamanism, which is really, the ancestral or the traditional paradigm, the traditional animist healing ways. A lot of that was so suppressed, oppressed, or syncretized into Christianity in particular. So at this point, us modern folks are by and large studying with indigenous folks and exploring traditional cultures, intact traditional cultures, to sort of relearn and remember how to do this. But in essence, shamans are people who can, well, by whatever name, shamans are people who can enter into that non-ordinary state of consciousness, that kind of trance state, to connect with other than human powers. So ancestors, aspects of nature, deities. And it's through that connection that they're able to do healing work, divination, different kinds of ritual and service to the community. So one of the ways that that trance state can be achieved is through journeying, which is my practice with a drum. The rhythm of the drum helps us kind of enter that state. And so cultivating relationships with my helping spirits. Over time, Mary started to keep showing up, and became one of the primary, again, deities. However we want to define her, she became kind of front and center. Um, and So then channeling, the other part of your question, I mean, there's different ways of channeling. I always used to associate it with, like the possession state. Like basically I leave the building and a spirit uses my voice box, like that. But that isn't the way that it works for me at this point. It's much more gentle, and it's almost as though, or maybe it is, that Mary is sitting next to me. And so she's speaking, and I'm interpreting, translating, kind of passing along her words. So I'm still here, I'm still Mikki doing the thing, but she's kind of driving the car,
Right. So a few points I want to address there.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is that I think, okay, so in my opinion, every single person on the planet has like psychic abilities or creative, otherworldly abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it's not a path for everybody.
Yes.
And I was listening to some messages from a friend right now who's reconnecting to her roots in India. And when I say roots, I mean her spiritual path. She's a classical Indian dancer and has been training and performing in that particular style for over 20 years. And as I was listening to her message this morning, and she was conveying just that sentiment that it's not an easy path. It requires a lot of sacrifice. It requires commitment. It requires responsibility, not just to yourself, but to the lineage and to the community at large. So on the one hand, I really want to commend you because it's also not an easy path to do the healing work, however you name it. And it's also a way of life. It's not something that you do once in a while, or go to church once a week. It's something that's part of it's a daily practice. It's something, it should infuse your actions and your way of looking at the world every single day. So that's the one point that I wanted to bring into this conversation as well. And then the message on channeling, I think it's such a beautiful way of communicating with the divine. And I'm curious if you could also kind of expand on the feeling experience. What does it feel like to have this energy, the energy of Mother Mary specifically in your body?
Mm. I think I'm fortunate that I do this kind of style of channeling, that it's conscious, that I'm still here because I can answer that question. Like I remember all of it. I'm aware of all of it. And, whatever stories I'm telling myself, whatever happened during the day, I got stuck in traffic, dinner, blah, 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 all the things, the volume gets turned all the way down. And so there's just me and her. And so it's a relief, kind of. I'm the most present, kind of most scaled back version of myself. And I mean, just to get dunked in love, just to have the presence of someone who is so deeply kind, and to just get to be there and swim in that for an hour. It's a bit indescribable, but I hope I'm impressing upon folks a little of what it's like. It's it's a hot bath for the soul in a way. Yeah.
I love that. It's a beautiful image. Now, there must be a difference, though, between normal, like what we perceive to be normal everyday interactions, like the interaction between you and me, which is also very external and is mediated by our electronic devices and the interwebs. And the very, maybe I'm going to call it immediate experience of communicating with a being how did you call it? Other than human being. There must be a difference in that kind of feeling experience. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, the fact that I just had to think about that is sort of points to it. Like I'm not using my prefrontal cortex when I'm with Mary, which isn't to say that there isn't still some discernment or whatever, but I mean, it's ritual space. It's deep ritual space. which is transportive, and it's specifically not the ordinary reality that we
Yes,
walk around with.
right.
Yeah, yeah. But it does
So,
feel
sorry, go ahead.
it does feel different. Absolutely.
It does. I'm going to insert one more thing here. And there was a time in my life too when I was training with a shamanic practitioner. And what I say now is that I practice some energy work because I don't follow that path. I just practice some kind of energy healing work from time to time. But when I was really deep in that world, and I felt like I was doing some channeling work. I wouldn't use the word channeling, but just because that's a word that some people know, it's out in the collective, that's what I'm going to call it. And for me, it would feel like maybe like a radio, and like tuning into different frequencies. Like the antennas are like hooked, like there's like these radio waves, and it's just like you're hooking on to one of infinite possible frequencies. And that was a way that I could describe that experience. Does that resonate for you at all?
Yeah, definitely it does. And I would say for folks who are maybe venturing in that direction, we want to be careful which station we're tuning into.
Yes.
So just, another example is like if you're throwing a party, you don't just invite everybody with all the doors and windows open. You want to make sure that the people who are in your space are like not going to ruin your sofa and eat all your food, and
Right.
so just be a bit cautious and discerning about it.
Right. And I think this is where we go back to the importance of lineage and teachers and the responsibility marked.
Sure.
In this work.
Yeah. I didn't go take a workshop someplace and then start doing this. It was a process.
Right. Okay, let's move on, because I feel like we could have this discussion for a long time.
Sure.
Okay, great. So as I kind of already alluded to, when I finished reading your book, I felt a real sense of ease and comfort and even grace, and as if I was being held by our mother, as you call her in the book. And that was, I think it was something I didn't even know that I needed, but I was just like longing for that loving embrace of the mother. And at the same time, this is what really excited me too, is I loved how Mother Mary came through as this kind of wild, fierce figure in your book too at times, which is something that I never would have associated with her at all, because the image, as you say in your book, of her is sometimes as this really delicate, docile porcelain doll figure, which she has been depicted as. And we don't need to go into the why. That's a whole other conversation. And this fierce Mary that comes through in your book, it resonated with me so much, particularly now, because I've been working with the Medusa energy for the last month or so since I was in Greece. And she had been really trying to not just explain to me, but help me embody and feel and understand the wild, primal feminine energy, which I think came through in your description of Mother Mary. And I want to read a quote, actually, that speaks directly to that, a quote from your book. But when she reveals herself again, pulling aside the robe and bending her knees deeply, she howls. The scream isn't evil or terrifying. It is the raw, wordless belly growl, the primal song of being alive, of being life. And in my mind, I also have this image of a woman giving birth, the moment of the baby coming out, and those primal howls that come from women when that happens, the sound of life. Okay, with everything that I just said, of course you can reply to any of it, but I'm curious if you could discuss what you feel or understand the wild feminine to be, and how Mother Mary embodies this energy?
It's such a fabulous question. Because again, yes, she seems so often, the story that is told about her is that she's this porcelain statue or a stained glass window. But of course, she was flesh. She was, she did give birth. She did probably squat like that and scream at some point in her life. Um, and when I hear the phrase wild feminine, like the first word that comes to mind for me is unapologetic.
Mm,
That there's no shame in being alive with everything that entails.
yes.
It is pleasure and bliss and devotion and and heaven and all of that, and it's also things rotting in the soil. Like that is generative. We need that to happen in order for anything to grow. And so there's no shame in the dirt.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I mean the ocean's never going to apologize for anything. There's
Yeah.
that sense of wildness for me is just the stuff of life, and yeah, it's sort of unflinching inclusivity of all of that, and I think Mary embodies that, um, or sort of embraces that in being a mother, in being unconditional in her acceptance of us.
Mm,
And she did know pleasure, and she did know pomegranates and little baby toes and all the sweetness, but she also knew the horror of losing a child. And she knew grief and she knew numbness. And she's kind of here for all of it,
yes.
without apology, without sugarcoating. Like she can be
Right.
totally present for it.
Yeah, I mean, I love this description, and I had written it down somewhere. Now I can't find where I wrote it, but this description of her like as hardworking and her gnarled hands and the wear and tear of having children, and loving Joseph, like being a mother, being a wife, being you know working, like the physical labor that it would have life would have required for most people, especially at that time in human history.
Mm-hmm.
That just really helped give me a holistic picture of her. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, one of the things that she always shares with me, um, I don't know, it's kind of our greeting, is that she takes my hands
Mm,
and I can feel that she has calluses. Like
mm.
it's a human Mary. It's not an angelic ethereal Mary.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. So, separate but also parallel with this, I was just reading something yesterday about like the depictions of Greek gods, and many of them like kind of crystallized in their youth, in the depictions, whether in the statues or any of the other images that we see. And I think that's what's happened with Mary, Mother Mary as well, as she's crystallized in our imaginations at this one point in her life, which, I think emphasizes a particular archetype, but it's also limiting at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, we see her at Jesus's birth, and then we see her at the crucifixion.
Yes, exactly.
And like no other, like she didn't have any life experience in between. But we've done that to Jesus too.
Yes,
There's all those missing years.
exactly. Exactly. Um, yeah, which is a storytelling device. Okay. But in terms of,
Yes. Yes.
yeah. So also, you bring this up in the book, and I think it's also would behoove us not to bring it up in this interview as well, this conversation. And that is that, some people, probably a lot of people would find resistance to, this humanizing Mary in that way, like taking her outside of this little archetypal, bubble that we have her in. Um, expressing her inner life in the way that you do, and who she was outside of being the mother of Jesus, having other children, having a relationship with her husband. Again, you know, that raw, wild, feminine energy. So, and then you ask in your book, kind of building up to this point, which I thought was so brilliant, is does anyone have ownership over Mary or her story? And it's such a basic question, but something that like I hadn't considered for some almost like embarrassed that I never considered that. But it's such a great question. So I guess I have two questions here. One, the most important is, let's start with this. What would you say to those folks who might be feeling resistant to this version of Mary that comes through your book?
Well, I mean, I would say first that I get it. You know, like I understand the resistance. I understand skepticism. I understand, yeah, some hesitation to go there, because it does challenge the narratives that we grew up with. And it does challenge our ideas of the holy in a way. Um, and yeah, it makes sense that that might be a little triggering or a little scary, or you know, it's weird. It's weird to look back at what you've been taught, and accept that it's only one version of a story, right, or that maybe there's an unreliable narrator in there. You know, like that's weird and sometimes painful. So, so first, I would just say that I get it, and if they've listened this far, if they picked up the book, if they're curious at all, then I would just encourage more of the curiosity. I would invite people to just connect with her on whatever terms are comfortable for them.
I love that.
Yeah, you don't have to like believe me or take all of this on, but I'm curious about your curiosity and where it might lead you.
Right. I always say, you know, because my main deity, if you will, or non, what's the phrase we're using?
I've been saying other than human, which some of
other
my
than human.
Yeah.
Other than human, I like that. The other than human figure that I typically work with is Mary Magdalene, the other Mary. And what I've come to realize in my relationship with her and all of the work I've done with other people and Mary Magdalene is that she really comes to each one of us in a way that resonates not only with our innermost being, but with the healing, toward the healing that we're each working on, the area in our life that we're each working to heal. Specifically, I think with regard to the feminine, but not limited to that. And so I guess what I'm saying is I can see that Mother Mary is presenting herself in that way too, that she will show, she can be anything to anybody. If it resonates for someone to see her as this, you know, grieving mother or the all-loving, compassionate mother, then that's great, but can be so much more than that as well.
Yeah, I mean, and people can.
Right.
Like no living person is one thing, is one way.
Yes.
So, you know, relationship is relationship, and the one that we have with Mary Magdalene or with Mother Mary or with anyone else, I think can be nuanced in the same way.
Yes.
It's
Agreed.
not simple.
Yes. So it helps us understand ourselves better too, because we see the multiplicity of ourselves and other people.
Yes.
I think it's also really easy to do that to other people as well, to see them as this one thing and kind of ignore the multiplicity of what it means to be human.
Right. Well, we freeze them in time.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. Interesting point here. Okay. Okay. So moving along. Okay. I asked you before coming today, if there were any wisdom that hasn't been shared in the book, but that more specifically Mary has for us today to bring us maybe peace or guidance in troubled times. And I would like you to share that now,
Yeah,
if you could.
yeah. So I journeyed a bit, what was it, Tuesday night, kind of with this in mind. And it's so interesting because I set New Year's resolutions and I sort of wasn't quite keeping up with them already. And I wasn't going to talk to her about that, but that's where she went first. She was like, "Can we talk about how you're feeling right now? Like, let's, before we do anything else, like, can we talk about that?" And essentially, it was a kind of like a little not, I'm not doing enough, was sort of the sense of it. And she said, "Well, so you can either fix that and do more, or let go of the shame about it. It's up to you. But that shame feeling doesn't serve anybody. Like, she doesn't need it. My ancestors don't need it. The earth doesn't need it. Like, it's a waste of my life energy to feel
Right.
it." So she just sort of put it to me. She was like, "Look, you're going to have to let it go one way or the other. So you're going to let it go by doing more of the thing you want to be doing, or by staying as you are, but without the shame."
Right.
So, you know, I sat with that and processed that and decided to do more of the thing. But I wanted to share this, even though it's not the heart of her message, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who carries some of that. Like, "Oh, I should have exercised more, or I shouldn't have eaten cheese, or I should, you know, whatever it is."
Yes.
So just to put that out there, like,
I love that. Yes.
we get to choose how to relate to that.
Yes.
But with that out of the way, then she was saying, I wrote it down a bit because it was a little esoteric and mystical, but we embraced, but I sort of fell through her body and into the universe.
Mm.
And so she was the universe, like dressed in robes. And her beating heart was like the heart of the universe. And she said that that heart is everywhere. It's the heart of creation, which means it lives in everything. It beats in the stones and in the trees and in each of us. And her words to me were that her heart beats alongside mine, all of ours. But so there's the universal heart, the creator heart, whatever, and then there's the heart that is us in this moment as we are. They beat together in our chests. And yeah, so we can discover her anywhere because that heart is everywhere and in each other and in the people we pass in the street. And so the practice is just to bring ourselves into remembering that.
I love that for so many reasons. One, that heart, the heart theme and the heart energy is something that weaves through your book. That's one of her major messages, right? And number two, what came up for me is that it reminds me of, in a way, the Hindu philosophies on the feminine, on Shakti, and Shakti meaning power, and the divine feminine is the life force energy that runs through everything, seen and unseen. And so that to me just feels like a clear parallel or another way of envisioning or experiencing a very similar divine feminine energy. Mm. And another thing I find exciting, which I'm sure everyone's excited to hear about, I just like to laugh at myself because I always have a million things to say, is that
keep doing
it. Is that in ancient Sumerian, and I understand in Sanskrit too, and I'd be curious to learn if there are other traditions in which this is the case. There is a parallel, or almost let's just say a parallel between the heart and the womb, in which they are seen as synonymous symbolically in these traditions. And the womb being the human creative generative center, where all life is created, sustained, birthed, and then dissolved, and then that cycle just continues, which is also the microcosmic version of what's happening at the cosmic level, which is what you also described in this visionary experience with Mary as the universe in her cosmic robes, which I would say, oh, that's like the womb of the universe. For me, I would interpret it. So that was all very powerful. And then it also reminded me of this. There's this woman, her name is Mother Mira. She's Indian born, and she is said to be the living embodiment of Mother Mary. Mm. And I went and I received darshan from her several years ago, right after I had gotten back from my first trip to India. And it was the most intense experience I've ever had in my life, because I went in all ego filled, like I just got back from India and I'm so spiritual. As we do. And then you go and you sit in front of her and it's silent. So you close your eyes and then you open your eyes and she's like this penetrating stare into your eyes. And it's like, you can't hide. She penetrates through the barrier of your ego. And then all of a sudden it's like highlighting any of the more like both the positive qualities and the what you might consider the negative qualities in yourself, so which are illusory anyway. So also that's what came up. That's what I was also seeing as you were describing Mary as the cosmos in her robe, because that's what I experienced in this brief moment with Mother Mira. Yes. So thank you for all of that.
Yeah. There's so much.
Yeah. And I'd be curious for anyone who's watching to also share, if anything came up for them. And any of the quotes, we're going to go in a minute into some of the quotes from the book that really resonated for me. And if anybody wants to share in the comments, please do. Was there anything else you wanted to say about?
Well, just sort of as you were describing these experiences, I'm reminded that it's going to go in the next book, because she keeps talking, so I keep writing. So there will be another book. But one of her messages was about kind of these different manifestations of the divine feminine, of goddess. Because around the world, there are so many stories of these mother figures, or these creatrix figures, And kind of asking about that, she said that she described them as mycelial.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to look at the one mushroom and think that it's by itself.
Right.
And in a way, it kind of is. It's its own being, but it's also connected to all of the other versions of mushroom.
Right.
By this underground network. And so
right.
I love to think of that. That this feminine energy is kind of operating in a similar way around the world.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a beautiful image. It's a beautiful image. I think trees have the same kind of system going on, where they're communicating underground. Their roots are like, and they're passing each other information, and the mother trees are like feeding the baby trees, and the baby trees aren't high enough to catch the sunlight. So I love that idea of the as above, so below.
Yes, and that sometimes the way to discover this is to go down.
Yes.
It's not necessarily all the ascension stuff. It's go down into the earth too.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. I actually, anyone who knows me knows that I have an issue with this word ascension, but I think that's a conversation for another time, just so we can get to the quotes. Okay. Well, sorry, there's another question here, but let's get to the quotes and I'll ask this other one if there's time. So here we go. And this is the quote that I actually used on the marketing, which is, your body is the story of life and eventual death, of survival, of continuity. Your body is the story of love. So I can just say so much of my work is geared toward embodiment and resacralizing the female body, in particularly because in the Western tradition, oops, one second.
We're waiting for Annalisa to come back. Technical things. Here we go.
Oh, sorry, I lost you. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh my goddess. Sorry. Mercury retrograde. Can you see me? Oh, not yet.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you for staying with us, everybody that's on here live. Well, I will fix that later on. Anyway, so what came up for me in this quote is that, my work is all about embodiment and resacralizing the female body, because particularly in the Western tradition, although not limited to the Western tradition, the female body has been, projected on as a place of sin, danger to men, dirty, toxic, the not normal body. And so what I love about this quote is that it actually reaffirms this concept. Yes, all bodies, but I'm going to specifically speak to the female body for just a moment. Because literally for me, like, as I'd mentioned earlier about the womb, like our bodies do have this potential, creative, generative potential of life and death, which is a literal and symbolic female bodily, experience and quality. And whether or not you have children is actually beside the point. And, and so I love that love at the end of the day is the fullest expression of the body. Can you maybe explain what her words mean to you in this particular quote?
Yeah, well, so that quote is part of the section on pilgrimage and this notion that we have to go somewhere else to encounter the holy.
Right.
And my favorite line from that section is something like, "What use would it be to go to Israel if you can't visit your own belly?" And
wow.
And so the inward focus that we can find holy right where we sit, like that, to me, I almost want to cry every time I read that section, because it is so easy to divorce ourselves from our own bodies, from our own experience, from sensation and food and sex and all of it. So there's a tenderness for me.
Yeah.
In just coming right back here and knowing that this is good enough to be holy.
Yeah, exactly. Because in the Christian tradition, traditionally, the body has been seen as sinful and something to transcend and ascend, which is back to this word ascend. The core reason I have a problem with that word, because in this tradition, that has been the goal, to devalue and debase the body. Mm-hmm. When I believe, as you suggested, that enlightenment can actually happen through the body.
Mm-hmm. It happens here. It happens in our organs. It happens in our perception.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. And so we talked about shame already, which was some of the guidance that she gave you more recently. And there were a few quotes that I wrote down that were within kind of a whole conversation about shame. And one of them is, it being sin isn't about redemption or punishment as much as course correction so that we can stay in right relationship. I love this terminology, right relationship. And also, I'm here to tell you that the secret, deep, dark thing that you think is so terrible and makes you unlovable is the very thing that can bring you the deepest love and grace. Accept it and offer yourself kindness. Now, I feel like that in a way kind of speaks to what she was saying to you personally. In a way, that concept of accepting it and offering yourself forgiveness.
Yeah. And it's again, right relationship, which is a Buddhist term, really.
Right.
But how, can we be in right relationship to our own selves and our own shadows? Because if we're warring with ourselves, if we're trying to, again, like divorce, amputate parts of who we are, then that's not right relationship.
Right.
So this sense of atonement, of purification, of redemption isn't about somehow, I don't know, like being okay with the amputation that we've done.
Mm-hmm.
It's the bringing back.
Right.
The reconciliation with those parts of ourselves.
Right. Exactly. Yes, exactly. And one more quote here I want to tack on to that is, atonement and purification are processes of remembering, of uncovering your original understanding of love, grace, and innocence. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking about this word purification and this feeling that I needed to wear white, because traditionally white is like the color associated with purity in many traditions, right? And then I was thinking about how I don't like wearing white typically, because white gets dirty so easily, and I can't stand it when it gets, when there's even one smudge of dirt on white. And so I was thinking about it. I was like wrestling with it in my mind in terms of my materiality, like the literal and like physical experience of white and dirtiness, and then the spiritual concept. And so I'm just thinking about it right now, actually on the spot. And I think kind of tying that in with what you're saying about not divorcing yourself from the parts of yourself you don't like, or the shameful parts. Like, I think this conversation between, purity and unpurity is like, okay, like there's a little dirty spot on here, but that's okay. It's just there. Like, but I'll, wash it later, or maybe it's just a mark of what's now on this garment, as like a comparison to like me as the human, right? Like, okay, I've got this thing now. This thing maybe I'm identifying this thing that maybe I don't like about myself, or a little quirk about myself, or this thing that I did that I feel bad about. But it's, rather than trying to deny it, it's like atone, accept it, accept it and integrate it as part of who you are. That's what I'm getting from this series of quotes.
Yeah, for sure. There's all of that. I would read it much the same way. And I love the shirt analogy too. That's perfect. Yeah, and I think just to and this is a, from what I understand, like a very kind of traditional or indigenous viewpoint too. That if you miss the mark, you fix it. That's all.
Right.
You don't need to carry a sense of guilt and penance with you forever. It's not that. It's like, oh, you screwed up? Okay, well, apologize, make it right, do better next time.
Yes.
That's it. It doesn't have to be so heavy and so complicated. And I think that's a little of what Mary says in those sections too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not like you're going to go to hell. It's not like you're going to be,
You're not ruined forever.
Yeah. Atonement is always possible. And I think like for a lot of people, like atonement also can carry like this heavy burden almost, or meaning, that that's not what I'm understanding through her words.
Right. Yeah. It's just a coming back into the fold. This is sort of the way that I feel she intends it. Yeah.
Interesting. Ooh, so much to like further kind of sit with and meditate on. And here we go. Here's one method of doing that. Ceremony and ritual are very useful tools, not because they put us right with God, because there's no way to be out of God's presence and love, but because they help us to remember. So I love this reminder too, that there's no way to be out of God's presence and love. There's nothing we can do that will keep us from God.
Mhm.
Can you expand on that a little bit in your own interpretation?
Sure. And in my own practice, I tend not to even use the word God,
Yes.
because to me it carries so many other stories that I don't resonate with.
Yes.
Not that I don't believe that there's some sort of animating force in the universe, but I don't tend to call it that. So,
Yes.
um,
I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't use that word typically either, but
yeah, but I think maybe for a lot of people um, who believe that we can be out of presence, they're using the word God,
yes,
perhaps.
yes,
Um,
yes.
so, but anyway, maybe that's semantics, but I think it's this heart of the universe thing again. That if we are all if all of our hearts are beating with the heart of the universe, there's nothing that can sever that. It's just impossible.
Right,
Like we are made of it.
right, totally.
Yeah.
Um, hold on just one second. Okay, good. I just want to make sure we were still live streaming. I had a moment where I was like, oh my God, are we still live streaming? um, let me just check on time too. Okay, we're closing in on time. But I have two more quotes that I want to read. And one of them comes from Saint Anne, or Saint Anna. I always refer to her as Saint Anna because that's how I came to know Anna, which really excited me that she comes into your book too, because she's my matron saint. And so they kind of share this. They came into one of your circles or one of your healing events, as I understand it, and gave some co-facilitated some guidance, if you will. And so, and the topic at hand was to discuss women's roles and responsibilities. This quote, not as society dictates, but as your hearts dictate. Your role is never to do anything that goes against your integrity or your heart. If you do what you do with a full heart, that's what changes the world. That's the full expression of femininity. Right? So this whole conversation was on, I don't want to say the real, but the truth of the feminine, and like what that real feminine energy is beyond, if you will, like, society's description of what femininity is. And so in my experience reading this section, actually, it was really interesting. I really had to read through it a few times, because it really requires attentive listening in order to hear what they're saying. And then, of course, there's that famous quote in the Gospels, those with ears hear, because the hearing is not just like receiving the words, it's like hearing the message behind the words. So in order to hear the feminine spirit and understand it, and I could feel the transmission of this feminine power and the kind of dichotomy between feminine power being strong and fierce, but also really soft and subtle. So the fierceness is not what we typically associate with fierceness, like aggression or like a trying to force somebody power over. So maybe I'm wondering if you could describe your experience of this particular transmission, and also elaborate on what femininity means to you, or means to you now that you've had that transmission.
Oh, it's such a terrific question, because I've been thinking lately about kind of the fluidity of masculine and feminine, and how I don't know, how maybe so much of it is queer in a way,
Mm.
and yeah, relative. Um, so, and that's my own rumination. That's not Mary talking, but there's a little of that I'm kind of sitting with. But I know even just in having Mary and Anne both sit with me, they were two very different expressions of feminine energy. And, you know, Mary as archetypal mother, and her, yeah, there's a softness, a strength for sure, but a gentleness. And then Anne as an elder, like Anne is sort of crone and totally no nonsense. Like you can't fool her. And it's all with love and humor and you know, good spirits, but I wouldn't cross her. You know,
Yeah.
like she's a granny who knows her business.
Yes.
Um, and so just these two figures sitting with me, it was like these two really vibrant, fully realized expressions of the feminine, and
Yeah.
not better or you know, more powerful, less powerful, just different.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think what I'm sort of coming around to is that the feminine can be so many things, and I think this quote that you read about being full-hearted and in our integrity is this inhabiting and walking with whatever version of the feminine energy is authentic to us at any given time
Mhm.
in our lives.
I love that. I love that. It really honors the multiplicity of experience in the individual as well.
Yeah. And from day to day, from year to year, you know, I'm not the same version of the feminine that I was when I was 20.
Yeah. And thank goodness.
It's kind of, yeah, she
Right?
was awesome. This is awesome too, you know, and
Yeah.
it'll still be awesome when I'm 80, hopefully, you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Right. And here's the last quote that I wrote down, and we're back to the heart again. The phrase open heart sometimes feels like there aren't boundaries. Full hearted, though, includes boundaries, self care, and advocacy. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. Um, yeah, it comes from the same part of the book. I think that was around the same time. And yeah, there's this walking with authenticity piece. Full-hearted is a knowing of yourself and a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging in the world. And I think that just that, just it's complicated to get there sometimes, but I
Yeah.
think that being able to do that has boundaries built in a way that just saying, oh, my heart chakra needs to be more open. No, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's not safe for that to happen. Maybe your heart's perfect exactly the way it is. And there's
Mhm.
other stuff that you can focus on and be devoted to.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't think, you know, from what I gathered from that transmission is I don't think that the direction or the guidance is for us to just be blown wide open all the time, loving everybody. I think it's to discover the love for ourselves that allows us to be upright in the world.
Yes. That's beautiful. I yeah, I think that there's always at play kind of that dichotomy of, like you're saying, with the boundaries. Like loving yourself is knowing how to love and when to love and where to love, where to keep opening and where to hold the
Mhm.
stronger boundaries, like you're saying. And I have an experience that I wanted to share, but I think we're a little too close to time. So I want to actually move forward and ask you if there's anything else regarding Mary's transmissions or guidance, or any other parting words from her that you think are really relevant and important to share right now that I didn't bring in.
I mean, I think she is so willing and ready to encourage us. Again, this heart word, you know,
Yeah.
courage and encourage. She's so ready would so love to cheer us on, and not just in a like yay for you way, but like really to stand behind you, to stand behind all of us. And she just needs the invitation. I think the wiser spirits are very consent oriented.
Mm,
Not going to jump in where they're not welcome,
right.
but with permission, with an invitation, she wants to be part of our lives and help us really live in this full-hearted, loving way.
Mm.
So
Oh, I think that's
that's an invitation you would like to extend.
thank you. That's a beautiful way to kind of pull our session to a close. And on that note, is there any wisdom from yourself, from your own healing practice, from your own experiences in the world that you feel like you would like to share?
I don't know that I have wisdom, but I can just make a prayer for everybody that
Let's do that.
yeah, I mean, really from my heart, just your prayers are my prayers, just lifting up that everyone is well and safe, and may we all have what we need. That's it. That's the best prayer I know.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been such fun and
It
a
has been fun.
conversation. I want it to keep going, but out of respect for you and everybody else, we'll come to a close. This is the boundary. But before we close, can you please share with everybody, again, one more time, where they can learn more about your work, and maybe elaborate a little bit on your workshops and that you offer?
Sure. Yeah. So everything's at mikkibaloy.com, and I do offer one-on-one healing sessions, both shamanic and ancestral lineage healing. And I officiate weddings locally, and I do a bit of teaching, and also have some live channeling sessions. So people can tune in virtually. So come in your jammies with some tea and listen to Mary. So all of that's always on my website. I have a mailing list, which is probably the best way to keep in touch, because the algorithms do what they do. But I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well. And the book is Conversations with Mother Mary. Ebook and print versions are on Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This has been a pleasure. And to everybody at home, again, another reminder, if you liked this conversation, please hit like. Please leave a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts on everything that we talked about today, and I will definitely share those with Mikki. And please subscribe to the channel, and please share this with other like-minded souls that would love to hear Mary's wisdom and Mikki's wisdom. They're both equally important. And with that, until next time, ciao.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.